Good evening. Welcome, Mr. Cole.
Hi there.
Hello.
You must be Hannah. There you are. Yep, I see you.
Yes, I matched my background by accident, so
Got it.
floating head.
Yeah, my PC is in a docking station, so no camera for me.
No problem. We can hear you very well. So
Good.
that's what's important. We'll get started, I think, hopefully right at 6. We'll give folks a couple more minutes to join. But just so everyone knows, we are recording now, and all our sessions will be recorded so that they can be referenced to go back to, and also for those who may not be able to join us this evening.
How many are you expecting tonight?
I think around 5 to 7 folks. There was some overlap. We, in order to make this a efficient process and to keep things fresh, we did schedule things concurrently. So there's also the community facilities going on this evening, also being recorded, of course. So some folks signed up for both. So not sure if they may choose to go to the other one and then listen to the recording later. But looks like now we have 9 of us on the phone, or excuse me, on the WebEx, and we're at 6. Dave, do you think we should jump in, or do you want to give folks a couple more minutes? I think we have a good amount of the people who signed up.
Yeah, I think we can get started and then
See how these get on.
yeah, so I think we can get started and then we'll, there's plenty of time for conversation if we have it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So I just want to welcome everyone. My name is Hannah Clark. I'm with Michael Baker International. I am very excited. I get to help facilitate these working group sessions alongside South Whitehall. As you know, we have Dave Manhart here as well, who's the Director of Community Economic Development. We'll do a quick round of introductions for everyone. I'll just quickly say your name, and if you want to give us your name and wave hello. If you want to put your video on, you are welcome to. But this is very much going to be, there's going to be a brief presentation on the existing conditions, and then really this is a back and forth discussion so we can get situated as to where the township is in terms of community utilities. So with that, before we jump into the workbook, let's go around and do a round of introductions. So I'm going to go on the participant list. So Mr. Tope, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Al Tope. I'm a member of the Township Planning Commission.
Thank you. And Mr. Bender?
How you doing? Herb Bender, South Whitehall Township Public Works Manager. And I also have Mike Elias here with me. He's our MS4 and Utilities Coordinator. Hello.
Thank you so much. Mr. McNair?
Hi, Bill McNair, and I'm on the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission.
Thank you. And Dave Manhart?
Dave Manhart, Director of Community Development at South Whitehall Township.
And Dell, I believe you might be on the phone. If you want to unmute yourself. We can come back to you, Dell. Feel free to drop in the chat if you don't have access to audio. We'll go on to Diane Kelly.
Hi, thank you, Hannah. I'm Diane Kelly. I am a member of the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission, and I'm also a South Whitehall Township Commissioner.
Thank you so much. And Frank Cole.
Hey guys, I am a resident of Vistas of Green Hills. I've been here for 2 years. I'm also on the board, the HOA board for the community here with Camco. Sure.
Thank you. And the next person has, I think, their initials. So RSBWR, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, Richard Bronstein, lifelong resident of South Whitehall Township and a property owner.
Thank you so much. And finally, Scott Savitt.
Hello, Scott Savitt, Township resident since 2008. We live over by the Parkland High School in the Pheasant Hill section of the township.
Thank you so much, and my apologies. I should learn how to pronounce your last name by the end of the session, I promise.
Thanks.
Always have trouble with pronunciation. But anyway, I really just want to welcome everyone here this evening. If anyone on the line didn't get a chance to introduce themselves and wants to quickly jump in, unmute yourself and introduce before we get started.
Hi, Del Markwood. Sorry, it was unmutable for a while there. I'm just here helping some of the township people. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. So
Dave Wilson here, South Whitehall Township Planning Commission.
Thank you so much, Dave Wilson. So sorry I didn't see your name on the list. I'm very glad you're with us this evening. Anyone else? All right, then we will jump in. And so before we dive into tonight's discussion and hearing from South Whitehall Township staff on the existing conditions and where we stand with community utilities in South Whitehall, just a few quick points of reference. So everyone here should have received at least a digital copy of the community facilities workbook. And the workbook, the cover of it shared on the screen, is really our roadmap for the working group sessions that we will be going through. So they have the content, they have our discussion questions, and they really are meant to build out and be a resource for you as we go through these sessions. And if you have a hard copy of it, you can also use it to take notes, or if you're looking at it as a PDF, you can take notes on the PDF. But it's meant to be a document where you can capture your thoughts, capture your questions, and make sure that it, if you have comments as we go into the discussion, you can reference it. So just wanted to speak a bit more about how we envision the workbook. Welcome to the sessions, as these are public sessions. Anyone who is interested could sign up, and we are really excited that you all are taking the time to be part of these working groups. And we know that we have representation from across the township of various roles. So I think tonight everyone is wearing their resident hat and giving us their perspective as a South Whitehall resident, a member of the public. We know as the comprehensive plan moves forward, we will have input from the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. So tonight we're thinking about it in the resident lens. Finally, one thing I wanted to quickly share before we dive in is just a resource that we also have on the community utilities subpage. So this is a page where you can access the workbook. It's now linked directly to the workbook. It previously was not. But what I want to highlight here is the discussion questions. And so one of the things we set up is a very simple Google form that as you're following along this evening in our discussion, you'll see we're going to be using a tool that will allow us to have more interactive discussion in the virtual space. But if you think of something later on, or of course, sometimes things come to us after a meeting, you can come here and give your thoughts, additional thoughts on our discussion. And it's also a resource for those who maybe can't make it tonight and maybe watching a recording. And these exist, as you can see, for all the working groups. So if you wanted to also attend community facilities, but you'll be watching the recording later, this is where you can give some of your input in that space. So with that, I'm gonna just quickly walk us through what this process will look like. And I know you've heard about this. If you attended the intro meeting on June 29th, you heard some of the framing concepts that are really based in how we'll think through the recommendations and where South Whitehall is today and where you want to go. We also have resources from when the phase 4 kicked off on March 31st. So those are all available on the South Whitehall website. If you go to the southwhitehall.com/compplan, COMPPLAN, you'll be able to access the range of resources and also the working group subpages. So this again is our timeline, and we understand and we again really appreciate how much time you are giving to us in this short period. And the reason we wanted to do this in a way where things were happening fairly quickly was that we wanted the conversation to be fresh, and the idea is to stay top of mind so they could become those recommendations that you will be submitting as a working group to the Planning Commission to be incorporated into the document. So as you know, next week we will be going into meeting 2 with Lehigh Valley Planning Commission subject matter experts. Community Utilities will be meeting on the 21st. These will be virtual meetings. And we will have folks from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission to really be a resource in terms of information, but also in collaboration for the recommendations. And then we go into August, developing the recommendations and the final meeting to present them out. Again, these are your working group resources. This is the base list of resources. Something we learned last night in the transportation session is we want to grow specific resources or provide specific resources for each working group. So we will be adding to the resources links on each working group subpage as topics come up. So please, as we're talking about what information you want to know more about, definitely be sure to speak up in that section of our discussion, because we will work to provide as many resources as we have access to. And then if you want to contact anyone, again, myself, I will be the facilitator for the Community Utilities Working Group, obviously working very closely with Dave and Greg from South Whitehall and their colleagues who are joining us this evening. And now just kind of moving into what's grounding this comprehensive plan update. And these were the guiding principles that were identified when the comprehensive plan update kicked off, and kind of frame the goals or the framing concepts around how this comprehensive plan moves forward. And again, you can spend time reading this in the workbook, but this is just a reminder that this plan is a required document by the state of Pennsylvania. We are governed to update this plan every 10 years. So these are just some of the ways we need to think about how the comprehensive plan is used in guiding growth and change and development. So, and finally, as we kind of go into where we've been and where we are today, so we kicked off phase 4 on March 31st. And one of the things we did is asking South Whitehall folks who joined us, what is a word you would use to describe South Whitehall today? And we heard diverse, opportunity, growing, beautiful. So really great things. And then some things like congested, stressed, trafficky. So how are we going to balance these into the future? And one of the things the comprehensive plan does is give you tools and give you ways to think through what growth can look like. So, and then what could South Whitehall be 10 years from now? Thinking about open space, trails, opportunity, lots of different ideas were put out there. So again, these are for your reference as we move forward. And then if you did join us on June 29th, which was the introductory meeting for the working groups, we discussed these 3 framing concepts that are all available, again, on the South Whitehall Working Group webpage. I'll drop the link into the chat in a bit. But what we heard was from Dave provided the updates from the how do we grow, or excuse me, where do we grow and how do we grow in South Whitehall. These were surveys that looked and received, I think, you know, Dave can speak more to it, but over 600 responses about future growth. So his presentation and additional documents are available from on the June 29th page. We also heard from Forward Planning, who looked at the different economic development scenarios and what would the growth impacts be, particularly if we built out to a certain level from the how do we grow exercise. So that again is briefly described here, and then there is an accompanying document on the web page for the June 29th meeting where you can dive into what were the factors in that scenario. Finally, the transportation model, similar to economic development in the sense, looking at a growth scenario, what would the transportation impacts be? And really diving into, it's conceptual, it's not based in this is what the future will be, but again, you can read through what the methods were in your workbook and then access the supplemental documents. So with that, I'm just going to, about to pass it over to Dave, and just to, again, remind us tonight's meeting is about understanding existing conditions in South Whitehall, and what that references is where did the 2009 plan start? How did it get us to where we are today? What are some of the things that, as this comprehensive plan update was beginning in the first few phases, what were some of the existing conditions there? And then what is some of the regional context as well, and how we consider things like the regional comprehensive plan? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave, and he will walk you through the existing conditions information that we included in the workbook.
So the first page kind of sets the stage for community utilities. As Hannah mentioned, the MPC is a required the comp plan is a required document based on the MPC, or Municipal Planning Code, and that governs planning in the state of Pennsylvania. So each component of the comprehensive plan has a statement of what you're to focus on with regards to that topic area. So I'd just like to read that section. A plan for community facilities and utilities, which may include public and private education, recreation, municipal buildings, fire and police stations, libraries, hospitals. So all of those are the facility side of it. And then for the utility side, we have water supply and distribution, sewage and waste treatment, solid waste management, storm drainage, floodplain management, utility corridors and associated facilities, and other similar facilities or uses. So the MPC lumps facilities and utilities together. The 2009 comp plan split them out. We felt that it was important to look at utilities and facilities through separate lenses, and spend more time on each of the specific topic areas. If we had a community facilities and utilities working group, it would probably be pretty overwhelming. So we decided it would be better to split it up. So next slide. We included in the workbooks sections from the 2009 comprehensive plan. The idea of including these sections in the comp plan, or in the workbook, is to allow working group members to highlight sections or statements that are important or things that need additional consideration. So again, if you have a hard copy or a PDF, mark it up, make notes on it. I'll read the goal for infrastructure and services. The goal was to develop performance measures and benchmarks for all municipal services and utilities and expand or refine municipal functions to satisfactorily meet them as the township grows. So that's a pretty broad goal. There are additional goal statements in there. I don't want to, in the interest of time, I don't want to read all of them. But as you're kind of going through, skim through and see if there's specific ones that you would like to highlight, and we can discuss once we get to the open discussion. Next slide. So this is the map. It's actually labeled wrong. It's the water system map. It identifies proposed areas for additional transmission mains, existing service areas, and what they call growth opportunity areas. With regard to a comprehensive plan, growth opportunity areas are very important, and kind of that's the whole point of a comprehensive plan. So the other piece of this is to coordinate the comprehensive plan with our water expansion and our sewer expansions. Next slide. So the next slide is the sewer distribution or sewer service area map. Again, growth opportunity areas are identified, as well as proposed expansion to the system. Again, it's important to have that coordinated with our comprehensive plan. So that's really the main objective here, is to coordinate or make recommendations for sewer system and the water system, particularly with the 157 plan, 537 plan, which talks about expansion of sewer systems, and we'll get into that in a little more detail. Next slide. So these were recommendations from the 2009 comp plan that talked about utilities. The first one dealt with wellhead protection areas, so adopting ordinances that protect the wellheads that service the township. The second goal talks about groundwater recharge measures to help preserve water supply. The third one talks about fiscal impact studies that looks at alternatives for extending sewer or water. The third one talks about a 537 plan. So the 537 plan is required by the DEP, and it discusses sewer areas and also identifies areas for expansion. Fifth recommendation dealt with including utility extensions or utility work in a capital improvements plan. And then the sixth deals with identifying new growth areas. So those were all recommendations from the 2009 comp plan for the water and sewer utilities. So back when we first started the comp plan update, we prepared an existing conditions report. Included in that was a page that talked about our stormwater management system. Approximately 65 miles of storm sewer mains, over 1,500 inlets, and you can kind of see that the areas where the existing stormwater facilities are correspond with development. Next slide. And then we looked at water and sewer, compared it to when the comp plan was created, the 2009 comp plan, and what kind of growth we've seen as far as the utility. So we grew roughly 600 customers for the water utility, and quick math here, roughly 0.25 million gallons per day in sewage increases. So at the kickoff meeting, we asked specific questions related to the breakout sessions for community utilities, and what word would you use to describe those utilities. Some of the concerning ones were aging, which is a common theme for utilities across the country, and how you maintain a system. Also related to that is modernization. So these are all things to consider as we move forward in the discussions.
Great, thank you so much, Dave. And I do want to pause here because I think we have about 5 minutes if folks want to ask any clarifying questions to Dave or his colleagues who are on the line about some of the existing conditions, data, and information. Obviously, as Dave said, the goals give us a sense of the broad visions of where they wanted to go and could be a good start for as we begin to think about recommendations. But at this time, if you would like to speak, just drop your name in the chat if you can. And don't need to drop your question, just put your name in so we don't have multiple folks talking over one another. But does anyone have any questions for Dave? Mr. Cole.
Yeah, this is a Wordle, right? This slide.
It was using a similar product called Mentimeter.
Okay.
Yeah.
But from what I understand of these products, the bigger the word, the more interest there is in the word. So interestingly, the words sewer and water certainly stand out for me as potential issues. And in the community I'm in, we've had a lot of issues with water supply That's one of the reasons why I joined the utilities group, because I'm really interested in what's happening or not happening in my neighborhood in terms of where we live and the water that's supplied to us. We have had a lot of issues with warehouse work going on and what's not coming to us because it's going to a warehouse, and not just now, but in the future. So it's a major concern for everyone in my neighborhood. Again, I'm part of the HOA, so people are asking me questions. I'm like, hey, I have nothing to do with the township, but here's an opportunity to learn more. One of the things that was bantered about here locally was the question of whether there's enough water, or there's a pump house that actually can take care of this community that I'm in. For currently and in the very near future, there could be an issue with a water shortage or a water breakdown. So that's one of my concerns. But and of course, needs to improve is on here. So I think a lot of folks I think what you're going to get are people who respond to these kind of surveys anyway are going to have something to talk about. It's not just everyone's going to say beautiful, hooray, lack of choice. Internet, broadband, all that, that's just all part of what's available. I don't know how much you can change that unless you have RCN come through your neighborhood when both Service Electric and RCN are available. But that's a story for the utilities and having the township allow right of way for folks such as RCN when they've been blocked in certain communities. So that's one of my questions, but I'm really concerned if you guys have any feedback on what I can share with my neighbors in terms of the water supply as it currently exists, and as we see more warehouses popping up, what we can expect or how we're actually taxing them to pay for the water that we need.
So I'll take a stab at it, but again, I'm not certainly by no means the utility expert. So when developments come in, they go through a process, and there's a will serve letter which indicates that the utility has enough capacity to serve the development. So it's analyzed, the projected usage of the incoming development is looked at and analyzed against our capacity. And those will serve letters indicate that we have enough capacity to serve the existing development and any proposed development. So it goes through an analysis. So it's not like they just pop up and we have to serve them. Everything is looked at. With regard to warehouses, in general terms, warehouses are small water users, unless there's a fire. They typically have very potent suppression systems. But for the most part, as a water user, they are small water users. And, they become like any other utility customer and pay utility fees based on usage. So that gives it a little bit, and we can get into, if it's a concern or something that we'd like to get more information in, we can certainly add it as a recommendation to bring in, our engineers that look at the capacity issues and how they evaluate a future development compared to existing capacity is something we can certainly bring up as a topic to explore further.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Dave, this is Herb. You hit it right on the head. That's when we are having some water supply issue up at the Vistas, is when the fire pumps were being tested. But we are looking into a couple options to rectify that issue. So we are already aware of it, and we are working on some solutions so you folks up there won't have this issue.
I'm sorry, who's speaking? Can't really tell.
Herb
I'm sorry,
Bender from Public
Herb.
Works.
Oh,
Yes.
very good. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Scott, I believe you have a question next.
I do. So if we look back in the workbook on page 18, it mentions utilities, and they're very specific in terms of water supply, distribution, sewerage, waste treatment, solid waste management, et cetera, et cetera. There's no mention of natural gas, and there's no mention of broadband. So is that automatically outside the scope of what we're talking about now?
No. It's certainly on the table because it is a distribution system and it is considered a utility. Just with regards to gas, it's kind of at the whim of the utility, which is a private utility. So wherever they decide to do expansions, that's kind of how it happens. It doesn't mean that the comprehensive plan can't identify, prioritizing the extension of natural gas to certain sections of the town, as an example. So including natural gas in the utility section is certainly worth doing. And then with regard to broadband, the MPC is a old document and they don't like to update it very often. But broadband should certainly be included in utilities as well.
Right. The reason I ask is, Frank mentioned RCN versus Service Electric, that there are other potential providers out there. A few years ago, Verizon was saying that they're going to build Fios out everywhere, and that kind of came to a screeching halt. But there's nothing to say that they couldn't restart that process.
Correct. And there are service agreements, and again, I'm not an expert on it by any means, but there are agreements with the township, specifically for cable services. And as an example of a recommendation that could be put into the comp plan is, reopen that agreement to allow more competition is something that can be a recommendation. So I think, broadband and natural gas is something that we can certainly put on as topic areas to get more information on, and included in this section for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I'm going to move us into the discussion portion. So what we just experienced with some of the brief discussion and Q&A will be expanded upon as we move into our next piece. So I am going to drop into the chat a link to what you see on the screen, which is called a Jamboard. And this basically is our hope to recreate, when we're all together in a public meeting room and you get a stack of Post-its and they give you some things to respond to and you jot down your ideas and put them up. So to walk everyone through, if you're on the Jamboard, and we'll give folks a couple a minute or so to get in here. You'll see this screen, but it will be on a tab on your screen. And let's say you want to respond to this. So what information or data so far has felt significant in this session? And so you hit, and sorry, I will say there, this right here, it's the fourth icon down all the way to the left. If you hover over it, it will say sticky note. If you want to just create it on your using your keyboard, you do Control-Shift-P, and that will also allow you to get to the sticky note. How are folks able to see it? If you're in here, are you able to access it? You can drop it in the chat or just unmute yourself. Any questions about this setup? Basically, the only aspect that we'll be using as a group will be the sticky note tool. So when you click sticky note, you'll be able to write your response. And then if you want to hit save, it will put it up and you can keep writing as many as you want. Once you hit cancel, it'll exit out and then you can just, yep, someone's already got it. You can move it, put it on the board. So we are using this again. If you don't feel like engaging in the Jamboard, either drop your comment into the chat and we'll add it in, or unmute yourself and we'll record your comment or your response to this for you. So please have at it for a little bit. We're getting some responses here. We have a question about, and I'm just moving them down, the 2009 maps that included the growth opportunity area were interesting. Are those still relevant? And so I think the annotation request might be something, what's coming up, that that's not going to allow you to access the sticky note. So if you can try to get to the sticky note tab by hovering over the thing, the icons here on the side, the fourth one down to sticky note. If you're having trouble, just drop your comment into the chat or unmute yourself and we'll record it for you. Especially if you're on your phone, it might be a slightly different setup. So it might be easier to use the chat or just unmute yourself and give us your feedback. So water supply, water capacity are rising up. Odors coming from plants and manufacturing, water capacity for fire flows, the fiscal impact study for water and sewer alternatives from the 2009 plan. So again, I think as Dave said when he was referring to the goal statements from that 2009 comprehensive plan, that Dave, if you want to expand upon this, was the basis for how you frame some of the recommendations. So do you want to speak to any aspect of that, or how, areas to explore for more information? Oh, you're muted, Dave.
I was in the middle of a sticky note, so I kind of missed it. Sorry.
No, finish. I was just asking you about some of the important information or information that folks are highlighting were things that came, either were referenced in the goals or the map. So if you wanted to maybe speak to how that kind of data informs the recommendations in the plan.
Yeah, so all of this information gets brought into the plan. And in 2009, we looked at, well, not me, but we as the township, looked at existing areas served and worked through subcommittees to identify growth areas. And, the comment or question about, whether growth areas are still relevant, that's exactly why we're here doing the comprehensive plan. And part of that exercise of where should we grow asked that exact question, of identifying areas where growth may be accommodated or may be the smart place to grow. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we're doing here in looking at some of those specific areas for potential growth. The sticky note I was going to write, or I was getting ready to. So one of the things I'm doing is, as sticky notes are coming in, I'm kind of piggybacking on those with some additional information. What I was getting ready to put in was the impact of private sewer systems, and evaluating that. That kind of talks to the odor question. So evaluating the privately owned systems, and kind of looking at what a township can do, and DEP's regulations on those are something that should be discussed moving forward.
Great, thank you, David. We'll let you finish your sticky note if it's still up there, so we can see it added. So some other questions that came up, I know that Alto put into the chat, and maybe this could be answered by Herb, excuse me, or Dave. Does the township own the reservoir site on Huckleberry Ridge next to Allentown City Reserve? And please, Mr. Topa, if you'd like to unmute yourself and expand upon that, please feel free. Or if there's any feedback we have.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just want to get something clarified. talking the one off of Brickyard Road or the one where Ridge Farms is?
Mr. Tope, would you be able to clarify that or put it in the chat? Ridge Farm, he said.
No, the township does not own that. That is owned by LCA.
Right. Oh, sorry. Would you like to expand upon that?
Yeah, the only reservoir that we have is the one up on the top of Brickyard off of Huckleberry. And then we have one down at Cedar Brook Nursing Home. We have a reservoir, and we also have the PP&L water tower. Those are our three big reservoirs that we have.
Thank you so much for that. So a few other things we're seeing here about payment and who will pay for the future growth area water and sewer infrastructure. What are the impacts of areas of the township that don't have access to municipal sewer system, and sorry, the related environmental impacts of those who are maybe using private sewer systems. Thinking about the fiscal impact study. So would anyone like to, who put up a comment, like to expand upon their thoughts here for the group, or anyone have reactions to what you're seeing up here, or things you want to emphasize are important moving forward? And from the township perspective too, please, I know Dave, you provided some initial insight into some of the issues of or at least the impact, like you said, of the private sewer systems. I don't know if there are other things on here that are resonating or you're seeing would be good to expand upon.
So just with regards to expansion and who pays, typically if a development requires an expansion, the developer pays for that expansion. It's not the case where the township's putting it, not typically. Some townships will expand sewer to get more customers or serve a area. For example, if there's an area of older septic systems that all the septic systems are failing, sometimes sewers can get expanded to serve those areas. And it certainly makes sense to expand to areas like that, just from a water quality issue, both surface water and groundwater. So that's kind of, with regards to expansion, touches on that a little bit.
Great, thank you. So before we move to the next question, just welcoming any other final thoughts or pieces about this. And just as we walk through this, you'll see on the next slide, these questions are building on one another. So when you are talking about water capacity, why is that significant in the context of a 10-year plan for the township? If you're thinking about fiscal impacts, and some of these might, are very obvious, or maybe we referenced it before, but please feel free to put in your thoughts about why what you listed previously, some of the data points that are used to form the recommendations, are important to consider as we move forward in planning for the next 10 years. Or if there's another significant aspect that you want to highlight here. So again, welcome you to add your sticky notes if you've gotten used to that. Also feel free to put it in the chat, or again, just unmute yourself and you can speak and we'll record.
Hannah, is the slide supposed to advance to the whiteboard?
So if you are on,
Oh,
my
I see.
apologies. If you are on your own, and this happened last night too, and I apologize, just hit the
Page
button
over.
here, just page over, and that will allow you to respond to that question.
Very
Thank
cool.
you so much. Sorry about that, guys. So linking the importance of community utilities into quality of life, and, you know, obviously South Whitehall as a place that is attractive to live. So other thoughts, yes. So keeping our properties desirable, environmental impacts. So I think here as we're adding in thoughts, and again, if anyone just wants to unmute themselves and speak to it, that works as well, or dropping it in the chat. This is definitely a discussion, and this is just a tool for us to help move it along. So if anyone wants to add their thoughts or expand upon something, maybe they already posted here. The importance of resource conservation. And from the township side, if you have thoughts or comments about this, please also feel free to speak up from your perspective in planning and public works.
Yeah, hi, I just read the one sticky note, don't want to run out of water. We have plenty of water. We can turn our wells up if we have to. We can actually take more water from LCA if we would had to. We're definitely not in a shortage of any kind of water.
Thank you for adding that context. Any questions or thoughts about that piece? We're also, I think, again, linking it to future growth. As Dave said, one of the reasons that community utilities is so important and the infrastructure is because it does direct where, or potentially can direct where growth happens. And from those maps that were provided from the 2009 plan, in theory, I think, and Dave can speak to this alongside the folks from Public Works, is will those maps be updated? The maps that were, you know, with the future growth areas, and how will this comp plan speak to some of that infrastructure?
Yeah, so the maps will be updated. So the new comprehensive plan that we're working on now will make recommendations for future growth areas. One of the things that water and sewer allows is for density. So basically, if you're sewered, you can put more houses per acre than you can if you need an individual septic system. So that's why typically you'll see a lot of planning documents across the country will, you know, have higher densities in areas that are sewered and watered, and lower densities that are on private systems. And LVPC will most certainly talk about that. When you look at their growth area, that very closely corresponds with sewer and water infrastructure. So the idea of encouraging growth in areas that are already have the infrastructure and or capacity to serve is an important piece for comprehensive plans, and that's why updating the map, both maps, would be important.
Great, thank you for that. I think obviously there's a lot to take in, so understanding how some of what we saw from the 2009 plan will get updated or be influenced by the recommendations this group will be coming up with is helpful. I think Al Tope asked about capital costs, and I don't know, Mr. Tope, if you want to expand on that at all, if you want to unmute yourself, or generally thinking about what the costs will be for the capital improvements costs. And I know that was referenced in the 2009 plan, and how that maybe influences how recommendations are made. So sorry, go ahead.
I just saw it.
Sorry, of system expansion. Got it.
Again, with system expansion, it's typically because a developer wants it, you know, or if it's zoned for something and the developer wants to take advantage of the density in the zoning, they may want to run or extend sewer and water to that facility to take advantage of that zoning. The other piece with capital cost, and we kind of talked about it last night at the transportation working group, is the idea of a capital improvement plan where projects are identified and costs are associated with them. Helps a township manage costs in the future and, you know, balance the funds that they have available with projects that are on a capital improvement plan, and prioritize projects on that plan. So that's one way to kind of manage capital costs for, you know, future projects. Expansion could potentially be one of those. But, you know, a lot of times maintenance is a big component. And I'm sure Herb and Mike are nodding their heads on the maintenance of the system. Has a pretty large capital cost.
Yes. No. Oh, and I don't know if someone was about to speak about that. So it's also just some other themes that are coming out here. And again, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak up if these are yours or you have thoughts about it. So in terms of environmental impacts, and then not these necessarily are directly associated, but environmental impacts of the community utilities, and then thinking about some concepts of green energy or solar panels and how that fits into the community utility structure. Does anyone who added that in want to speak to that, or are there thoughts from the township?
The idea of green energy and renewables is absolutely something that should be included in the comprehensive plan. Frankly, I'm kicking myself for forgetting to mention it. And again, the LVPC has some guidance on renewable energy, and, you know, encouraging that and making recommendations for the township to encourage it, and or ways that the township can encourage it, is something that absolutely should, depending on input, but could be included in the utility section.
Great, thank you. And if the folks who submitted that want to add any thoughts. And finally, before we move to the next question, I think there are a few things here talking in different areas, but expanding access to different types of utilities. So someone mentioned natural gas, and then we also think about the ability to choose, have a more choice in service providers, as well as the comment about free market competition for broadband and 5G service expansion. So a lot of, I know, again, Dave, you were speaking to how the MPC, because it's such a document that's been around for a while, doesn't always speak directly to these things, but I am sure these are definitely considerations for the future of South Whitehall. And again, if the folks who wrote that want to add in any thoughts, feel free. And Dave, if you want to give us any thoughts, or Herb, if you want to add anything in before we move to the next.
Frank Cole here again. The 5G thing came up because what's interesting is, of course, I just got my new phone, which is 5G compatible, and the map for the vistas shows my house is not 5G, but if I drive, it's so funny. I drive about a half a mile and I've got beautiful 5G, and I just, it's something that's coming, and which means more equipment, right? Which means maybe not more towers, because 5G is smaller in nature. I was just reading about it yesterday. In these cities, they're like a big box instead of a big tower. So we're going to see changes in the way that we get our service in the future for cell towers. And of course, 5G can handle lots and lots of data. So who knows, 10 years from now, we could be talking about 10G, and it could be all of our TV and Wi-Fi comes directly from towers somewhere. So I think we have to look at it from the stance of, disruptive technologies. So we're going to see some stuff happening. But again, right now, people are interested in where 5G is currently and what it's going to look like a year from now. So it's interesting that, 2 years ago, we didn't talk about this, but now everybody wants it. So it's something that we should really think about, because it's part of the desirability of being in a neighborhood that you can pick up the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other question I want to answer for the possible expansion of natural gas services to established neighborhoods. There's actually a program out there through UTI that is called Gas Program. What the residents have to do is reach out to UGI, and they have to make sure it's viable for them to put the gas lines in. We actually worked on one this year in the Bungalow Park area where they put new gas main in, and they're in the process of hooking residents up right now. So it is possible to get gas there. You just have to sign up and go to that program, and they'll see if they can get you gas.
What's the name of the program again?
Get Gas Program is
Get
called.
Gas. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what's great about this is we have so much knowledge from the township, and then so many great ideas coming from all of our working group members. So we'll continue that with the next question. And this one is really, it's taking into the place-based account. And obviously, again, to go back to hammer it home to Dave's point about how the growth areas are determined and what do you want to see in terms of the geographic context of the township? Where are these concerns significant? And you can be very specific or more general, but this is obviously very informative as we reevaluate the maps and different ways that the community utilities are laid out. And I don't know, Dave, if you want to add anything to this, but it will be great to hear from folks. Thank you.
Just with regards to geography, if you look at the sewer map on page 21, you'll see the Huckleberry Ridge, approximate location of the Huckleberry Ridge is identified on both maps. That is a important feature for expansion of sewer, particularly because the flows all flow downhill. So that's why most of our sewer is south of the ridge, and north of the ridge there isn't. So the ability to sewer areas is dependent on geography, specifically elevations, and water systems are based on, there's different pressure zones, again, based on elevation of the source or the storage area. So that's just a little bit of background on how geography can kind of play a role in utility development and service areas.
So with that input, have at it with your Post-its, or feel free, again, if you're getting sick of doing the Post-its, just unmute yourself and give us your thoughts, or drop it in the chat. Again, this is very much a discussion, and we want to use this resource, the Jamboard, to capture it so we can see how it all comes together in this virtual space. And if anyone needs us to bring up the maps again, I'm happy to do so. That would be helpful. And obviously, I think we've heard a bit from some folks on here about your neighborhood or the area of where you live, and that's being potentially, an impetus for why you're here. So please feel free to put in your thoughts in that regard, as well as where you live in the township.
Just one comment that kind of is the overall, especially for utilities, the geographical significance of the utilities is primarily around service areas or the expansion of service areas. And, you know, again, back to another comment was identifying the growth areas is really important with regards to the utilities.
Great, thank you, Dave. And does anyone, I mean, this also, if anyone has a question when it comes to this, that would also, please feel free to ask any clarifying questions or throw them up here. So we have a few comments, neighborhood focused concerns in all planned communities. Emphasizing that type of development and where that's taking place. The sewer service north of Huckleberry Ridge and Jordan Valley. If that's something, I don't know if the folks from Public Works or want to speak to that, or if again, I think if the Public Works folks want, if you have any thoughts about where it's significant as we move forward, please, we'll add that in here too.
Yeah, I can give a little background about the sewer service north of Huckleberry Ridge, Jordan Valley. Again, it comes down to the ridge. We would need some sort of pumping station to get it over the ridge to let it be gravity fed back to the treatment plant. So that's why north of the ridge, we really don't have any sanitary up there because we don't have any pumping stations.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anything else here that folks want to throw into the mix in terms of where it's geographically significant?
Just to give a little bit of context on how this information is going to be used. The idea is that the working groups, I have a GIS background, so mapping and layering different pieces of information. So areas that are identified for sewer or existing sewer get overlaid onto, for example, natural resources, gets overlaid onto community facility service areas. And all of that informs future land use and or growth areas. So that's why it's important to get an idea of, you know, public's recommendations on where to sewer or where not to sewer, or where to expand or where not to expand, and things like that. Because it all gets kind of put into a puzzle and overlaid with these different layers to provide information. And that'll be handled at the Planning Commission. So that just gives a little context on how this information will be used moving forward, especially from the geography perspective.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Dave, for that context. And just so folks know, you know, because we have the Google form, which I'll just quickly switch to, you know, if you're some things that if you want to spend more time with the maps and then give your thoughts, this is definitely a space you can provide your feedback afterwards. And also, I'm, you know, especially because of the importance of geography with community utilities, this will continue to be a point of conversation and reference as we move forward, I'm sure. So just want to let folks know it's not something that, you know, this isn't the only time for input for this year. Since it seems like we don't, unless someone wants to add in or give us any of your thoughts, I'm going to move us to the next question. And this is a very general question, but I think it's definitely important to level set where we're at. When you're looking at, you know, what was stated in the 2009 plan, when you've heard what some of the updates are there points of disagreement or places where maybe we want to challenge, you know, how things are moving forward? So, you know, this is really a broad doesn't have to be just with one specific piece of information, but I think maybe potential areas where you'd like to see things be done differently or something like that. So please feel free again to share it however you would like, by post-it, by unmuting yourself, by dropping it in the chat. Again, these are super helpful for moving this work forward.
I guess
not.
Well, I was going to ask a question that may spark some conversation. As a group, as the utility working group, do we agree with the growth areas identified in the 2009 plan?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go and dig into it some more. I guess if I look at, okay, I'm going to be selfish and look at my neighborhood and I see green, right? Can I annotate? Here, do I have an annotate button?
There is an annotate button.
Okay, I just requested it.
Yeah,
I live right on this blue dot and I see green all around me. What's going on? What can possibly go on? There's a lot of cornfields. Are we as a planning group thinking about preserving farmland, thinking about do we really want to impact all the roads and all the roads that come through here that connect the other townships to 309 and to Tillman Street and all that? I mean, that's my question for the day. If this green is all growth opportunity, I'm wondering where the heck it's coming from. Like, unless we're just plowing the fields and putting concrete in.
And those are the exact questions that, we're going through this comprehensive plan. The resource protection working group we'll be talking about agricultural preservation, open space preservation. And, those comments, along with, utility comments and things that come out of each of these working groups, get distilled and synthesized by the Planning Commission into the new comprehensive plan. So, I think in general terms, the growth areas identified, some of them can be handled by existing systems with, for example, Herb kind of talked about the need for a pump station. So anything north of the ridge would need significant infrastructure improvements. Things south of the ridge can typically be handled through gravity. So they're a little cheaper to expand.
This is the ridge here, this black line?
That black line, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So one of the things with our how should we grow, and if I'm going off topic, stop me.
Well, I brought it up, right? Because
yeah.
My question is not even about utilities. It's about, what do we want to be when we grow up? And
exactly.
If we want all that green space to not be green anymore, because right now it's pretty green. I go out to the intersection of Closser and Blue Barn, and there's cornfields, and I know it's not going to be like that in 5 years.
Yeah.
I worry about that.
Those are definitely things to consider. And, one of the things we talked about with our How Do We Grow survey is we categorized types of development. So whether greenfield, infill, or redevelopment. And one of the things that we discovered through our analysis of that data is that redevelopment was the preferred development type. So looking at existing areas that already have some sort of development on them and could potentially take advantage of the existing infrastructure for a new type of development, whether that's more intensity, bigger shopping centers, or adding residential. So that kind of talks to the redevelopment versus greenfield development. And with regard to utilities, redevelopment, just by the nature of the term, is typically already served. So you won't see areas for redevelopment identified in a, growth area. But, that's, again, hopefully will come out of the discussions we have is, as a working group, is it recommended to expand, into these growth areas, or focus on redevelopment, and expanding sewer usage in our existing areas already served, are some of the things that could come out of this working group.
I think Scott has a comment there.
I do. So I realized that this map was, made over 10 years ago. I'm curious if density was figured into it. And the reason I ask is, I asked to annotate, because that seems like a cool thing to do.
It is.
So this area right here used to be essentially open space. There was no road. It was not a through road on Pheasant Hill. But as time has gone on, the properties on Orfield as well as on Pheasant Hill have filled in. Now, granted, they're 3-acre lots, but this was missed. So growth opportunity. How do we judge that as growth? Because this is kind of getting close to its maximum density based on the zoning.
So, kind of with regard to density, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but areas that are on existing or individual septic systems, generally it's good planning practice to require larger lots. In areas that are served, smaller lots, higher density. So when you look at kind of growth areas with regards to utilities, you can kind of think of that growth area as being more density. In just to simplify the conversation a little bit. And, as a group, is it where we want to see the density, or there's some areas that are already on here that make more sense than others? And we can kind of, as we go through this process, we'll formulate, by the third meeting, recommendations on how to identify these growth areas, or whether to alter them in one way or another, or prioritize different areas over others.
So the related question I have is, since this was a snapshot over 10 years ago and stuff has happened since then, what is the opportunity to revisit? Have we missed the opportunity to, do utility work in areas such as this, which are now, dense, well, I shouldn't say dense, more dense, or dense to their zoning capacity. And clearly, as part of that development, there was no mandate from the developer to do anything related to utilities, except maybe extend the water service, because that's really the only thing that's there.
Mm-hmm.
But point being, at some point you get to a critical density in an area, and I want to make sure that we're not missing things because their snapshots are 10 years apart. Make sense?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
So the idea, the process, in just kind of big picture, is the comprehensive plan recommends a future land use plan. That future land use plan is used to inform zoning changes. So much of the zoning changes that occurred after this plan were because the comprehensive plan recommended those zone changes. So that means that the new comprehensive plan can make recommendations for future growth areas at specific densities without getting into too much detail, as much detail as zoning gets into, but just kind of broader brush. You know, this is an area for higher density, or this is an area for lower density, or maintain density. So those are kind of the things that get looked at. And with regards to, you know, that specific area, you know, critical density, you know, you have, I know, I'm not sure if it's exactly there, but there were 2 developments and there's stub roads into an existing farm field.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's just to the kind of right here.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, whether that makes sense to continue that density so you have a cluster of like dense housing units, and whether that makes sense or wants to be recommended, or whether you want to, as a group and planning commission will ultimately make the recommendation to the BOC as to how to handle, you know, that would be considered an infill development because it's surrounded by 2 already existing developments. I'm hoping that got to kind of an answer for you. Just kind of explaining the process and how zoning can get changed based on the comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm. I'm not aware of any zoning changes. I think this whole area has been, at least for the last 10 years or so, 3-acre residential.
Yeah, and I'm not sure when, you know, some zoning changes are big where, you know, they change the minimum lot size, and some are just minor changes to, you know, require different development types. So there's a lot with zoning, and that's why the comprehensive plan kind of looks at more broad brush.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We got some annotations carrying over here. I'm gonna, if it's all right with the folks who were annotating, I'm just gonna stop it for the moment because I'm gonna move us to the next question, but also want to speak to what quickly is what here. More detailed information on the 2009 plan and what goals were met, those not met. I think that's a theme that we're hearing. We heard it last night in transportation, and it sounds like something would be useful for our working groups to have as they move forward. Do you agree with that, Dave?
Yeah. You know, and one of the things with comprehensive plans is a lot of times the terminology is very vague and can be interpreted a couple different ways. If you look on one of the pages, consider was the action item. And consider can be, you know, at a staff level, at a BOC level, at a planning commission level. Consider can mean all kinds of things. And one of the things we're hearing quite a bit is looking more at action items and implementable items and recommendations would be a significant difference between potentially this new plan and the older plan. With measurable results or measurable actions is kind of what we gathered from the last plan or the last meeting, and then it's also coming out in this meeting as well.
Yeah, Dave, I totally agree. I think really important to look at the language, and thank you for clarifying and highlighting that. So as we're winding down, we have a couple more questions, and would love for folks to give us if there's anything surprising from what we've shown here, or that were unexpected or things, again, that could be useful to look into more. So this does relate to, I think, some of the earlier questions, but I think also looks at how, the approaches that are taken, and if there's anything there that you found to be unexpected. And again, please, for those who have gotten comfortable with the annotation, or we can go to a map and speak more directly to some of the resources that were presented and the existing conditions, especially with some of the additional context that we've heard from Dave and the planning and just around the comprehensive plan development. Or Dave, is there anything that you find surprising that you want to kick us off?
I mean, I think the surprising thing for me when I looked at the map and the comprehensive plan in general is how growth areas were identified. And from a GIS perspective, looking at, layering additional information onto the mapping to kind of look at, areas that are better for growth than other areas by using the capabilities of overlaying is something that kind of surprised me a little bit. But again, that's coming from the GIS guy.
Well, you're building up a lot of resources, and it does seem, I know you referenced it, and I think something to maybe share directly with this group is where do we grow, given the relationship maybe just to the growth areas and the existing infrastructure and proposed, because I know we reference it briefly in the workbook, but there are supplemental documents that are available to everyone, but maybe we'll follow up with those directly as we go into the next meeting. Something else surprising, no sanitary sewer service in the northern part of the township. And definitely, I think they're learning about how elevation is influential. I wasn't as aware of that. Anything else someone would like to add before I move us to?
Yeah, I'm going to ask.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm going to ask something. I'm going to say something controversial. Why do we grow? When do we stop growing? I think that's a question, right? If we do a plan every 10 years, is there a point when there's saturation and there's no room for growth, or we just, what's the question that we ask?
Yeah, one of the requirements of the MPC, the Municipal Planning Code, is to accommodate future growth. And it is a huge question. And it kind of relates to, it's a question across the state and frankly across the country. How much growth is too much growth, and where do you stop, and when can you stop, and how much can you accommodate? That's kind of the existential question. So that's why when we did the where should we grow exercise, we kind of took projections, and the exercise was to put dots on the map where you think, the township can accommodate growth. And again, one of the things that kind of came out of that is looking at more areas of redevelopment, as opposed to looking at, accommodating growth in, the existing farmland areas. So
this doesn't belong here.
Yeah, it's
I'm just trying to put this in. I was trying to put this in the right place, which is way over here. Is there anything surprising? And it ended up in the wrong place. So I will get rid of it and put it where you asked me to put it, which is anything surprising.
And I did try to capture your comment on this number 5 page, but you please feel free to delete it. If that's,
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
no, but having your, please. I was just trying in real time to get please, and I did that for you as well, Dave, so you can. Any other thoughts here? I know we're winding down. And was this yours, Frank, the need to calculate, analyze the types of growth?
No, that wasn't me. That wasn't me.
Okay. So that,
The pink one.
yes, got it. It's very, and the person who put the need to calculate, analyze types of growth and density, would you like to expand upon that at all? No need to, but if you want to.
Sure, it's Diane Kelly. I was just commenting on Dave Manhart, your explanation of the MPC and needing to have all types of growth and development covered under our plan. And I think it would be important to look at what has been developed over the last 10 years and calculate where we are with the different categories of larger lots, smaller lots, townhouses, apartments, and just see where we are in the spectrum of what's required.
Yeah, and I think that yes. I think that's a great way to look at it is, you know, in 2009, what did our parcel data look like? And we can frankly do a count of the number of parcels, the number of units in 2009 compared to today, and get an idea of where those occurred and, you know, where the new lots are. Will certainly give an idea of, you know, what to do for the future. And I think, you know, it's the other piece of it is I'm trying to figure out where we fit that into the process. And I think, you know, when we get to the planning commission with it, we can certainly look at that and evaluate that with any, compare it to any, you know, recommendations that come out.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that's something that we would talk about at this point, since we're discussing water and sewer and what should go where. Certainly we've seen some impactful, dense developments in the last several years. And I just think it would be good to have a snapshot of where we've been, just like you said, and how many acres versus dwellings have been developed, and what do we still need to meet the MPC requirements? You know, what particular categories are we lacking?
One of the things with the what do we need to meet as far as, you know, there's a couple pieces to that. As a home rule state, and, you know, every township has to accommodate every type of use. That, you know, can be, you know, industrial versus residential. But then there's also conversations related to housing types, and frankly, Fair Housing Act information, and whether we as a township have enough variety in our housing types to accommodate, you know, different income levels. And, you know, there's advocates for fair housing that will challenge zoning ordinances that a township or municipality is not providing enough opportunity for lower cost housing. So those are things that, you know, definitely get considered and weighed into, you know, as we move forward with recommendations. Definitely things to consider. Unfortunately, there's no like formula for you have to meet X%. It would certainly be nice and make everything a lot easier if we had, the formula for we need X% of our land to be industrial. It would make it very easy, but unfortunately it's not. And it's one of the issues with planning in Pennsylvania, and frankly across the country, is what's enough. And we get into case law, and it's a big conversation. But what is our fair share of different uses and housing types? And it gets to a balancing act, and I'm kind of taking up a lot of time, and I'll stop.
Yeah. Thanks. Is there, can we start making our own judgments on that? I understand that it was done in, I guess, Lower Macungie with warehouses to say we have enough. And it seems like the 2009 plan was during a time when there was a lot of, it was, on the end of a recession, and there was a lot of feeling that we didn't want to cut back growth. And now, if anything, the mood has swung the other direction. We're hearing a lot today that there's plenty of growth that we have already. So maybe we start looking at, okay, we're at our limits. Do we start looking more at farm preservation and things like that, and say that's where we need to grow is farmland?
Yeah, and it's, again, there's no formula, but we can certainly get guidance on what recommendations we can put forward with regards to growth. With regards to Lower Macungie, they definitely have enough warehousing. They have enough. But how do you make that judgment? And, that judgment needs to be defensible in some respects. So that's the balancing act.
It seems like there could be one thing to do is we have some projected growth numbers. If we show we have enough housing to address that, that should be enough. We don't have to go past that, I would say. It'd be
and that we will definitely have those conversations when we get through working groups and in the housing group. Something to talk about. We're up against the clock here, and let's get to the next question here.
Well, I mean, this is really rich discussion, and I want to invite folks, since we are at time, since if you're in the Jamboard and you want to, before you head out, give us is anything missing? I think we can definitely go through some of the previous responses. I think there are items that folks pointed out that would be helpful to understand. So please feel free to throw that up here. And then something that we'll be distilling from tonight's meeting, but again, we would love to hear, what are some of your key takeaways from the discussion this evening? I think it covered a lot of ground because this is a broad topic. So we will take a stab as your facilitators in distilling some of the key takeaways, but we invite you to throw up your thoughts here on the Jamboard. And again, you can always access and add to, expand upon any of the questions on the Google form. And if anyone has any closing thoughts that they would like to put out there, please go ahead as we wrap up this session. This will, next week we'll be meeting with Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, and they will be speaking to really be a resource to talk through, questions around, some of the regional perspective in this area, and tools that they may recommend, or at least that they've seen utilized by other municipalities that could be useful in this context. So that will be the focus and the way we'll conduct the next session next week. So inviting any closing thoughts or questions or statements.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank
Yes,
you
thank
to
you.
everyone for spending time and, volunteering your time in the process and, helping engage and, input into this plan moving forward. So thank you for taking time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
See you again soon.
Yep.
See you soon. Tomorrow night
Tomorrow
housing.
night
Resource protection. Thank you so much.
and Thursday.
See you Thursday, Dave.
Planning Commission. And anyone have a final? Okay, everyone's signing off. Gonna stop recording.